Everybody's had some adventures. Everybody's had a few close calls. Everybody's got a story. What's yours?
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 11 of Cool Story with David J. MacNeil. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your continued support. This episode features a conversation with my buddy Vitold Vidic. Vitold was born and raised in a mining town in central Bosnia. During his teen years, he was forced to grow up quickly when age-old tensions resurfaced and the former Yugoslavia was plunged into war. For many, the heaviness of the surging violence would be a breaking point. But Vitold chose positivity over fear, which served him well during those difficult times. His parents later decided to move Vitold and his siblings to a safer location in Herzegovina, before finally packing up their lives in Europe and immigrating to Canada in 1997. Positivity and choosing to be happy also helped Vitold greatly as he navigated the uncharted waters of being a stranger in a new land and all the baggage that comes with that experience. Later in the podcast, we also discuss the greatest challenge of Vitold's young life, the loss of his wife, the love of his life, Barbara. But before we get to that chapter of Vitold's journey, here's my conversation with Vitold about the experience of living in the midst of war and the leap of faith the Vidic family made in immigrating to Canada. Hey, Vitold, how you doing, man?
Good, thank you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. You and I met. We were just trying to figure that out before we started the interview. We think it's probably about 2008, right around the time that the big recession hit. You started working at Bell as an editor, and I remember the day you came in because I think there was some kind of a change. We might have lost an editor or two, and they were trying out some new guys, and you came in, and I think it was busy, and I was introduced to you when we were like right in the middle of cutting something, and then finally we got introduced, and you said hello, and you said my name is Vitold, and I guess myself or somebody else said, sorry, repeat your name again, and you said you had a mnemonic device that you were using that obviously you'd used a few times before. What was it?
Well, it usually, I speak fast, and I'm going to try to speak slower today for this podcast, but, it's an unusual name. So I would say Vitold, and people are like, well, okay, yeah, and then I would say, okay, I told, you told, Vitold. And and instantly people are like, okay, I get it. No problem. Yep, I will never forget that.
Yeah.
And I've done it so many times, and it works all the time. So a lot of times you would come up with certain things and you'd be like, okay, like it's getting old, but it just works. It just works.
Yeah,
even though my nickname, even back when I was growing up back in Europe, is Vito, or so like Italians, or some of my friends would pronounce it as like Vito, more like a Vido, or pronunciation. But, my friends in Europe would say Vito. It's like in Italian, Vittorio, Vito. Or Vito, so it's like almost like a Vito, and I would even say like Vito Corleone, so it's like, it's like that.
Okay.
But I told you told Vitold is how I introduced myself to you.
Yes, I remember that.
But
it made me laugh hard, and I was like, that's perfect. I will remember his name more so than anybody else around here.
True.
Yeah, that was a great device. And I was like, I like that. I like this guy's thinking.
Yeah. Straight to the point.
Yeah. And then you kind of came in, and they were testing you out, and things went really well. And then all of a sudden you were one of our main editors, and we worked together there for at least maybe on and off for about 2 years.
Yeah, close to 2 years. It was a good spot. It was a good time for me because I was working for a company, and they folded, or it was a recession. Lots of places closed, and I needed work because I was a freelancer, and there was an opening at Bell TV, and I jumped at it, and it was a perfect time in my career because I was still working on my projects at that time. So working for Bell TV allowed me to still work on my independent projects part-time and work for Bell, almost full-time hours. I think it was like on average, it was like 25, 30 hours a week.
Yeah.
But that was ideal for me. Like it was almost like God-given,
Well, and I like your response because your response is very positive, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today, because you are somebody that is always positive. I always find every time I talk to you, you're upbeat, you're positive, things are going great. So I always enjoy touching base with you. And I say that because I also know that your life hasn't always been easy. One of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you today was you grew up as a young person in the middle of a conflict during the war. You were, how old were you in 1992 when the war broke out in the Balkans after the dissolution of Yugoslavia?
Yeah, so the war in Croatia and Slovenia was actually 1991, but there was no war in my part of former Yugoslavia, which was Bosnia. So
Yes.
that war that directly affected me, or it was much closer, I suppose, was in 1992. And by that time, I just turned 13. I was 13 years old. Yeah. So I think I was like grade 7, grade 8 around that time.
Right.
I think that in general, Soviet Union didn't necessarily have much to do with former Yugoslavia, but Eastern Bloc and the fall of communism did.
Mm-hmm.
So the country was, I think, as far as I know, the political system was called socialism. So Yugoslavia split with Soviet Union in 1948, I think. So Marshal Tito, that was the ruling country till he passed away, I think somewhere 1981, or I think I know it was like May 4th, because my mom's birthday was May 4th. And I don't think we celebrated that like a lot because that was always the day of mourning. So at 3 o'clock or 2:55 as a kid, you always had to stand in the middle of the city, wherever you are. If you cross the street, if you have to stop. And because sirens were, you can hear sirens. So, but, he was always playing on both sides, but the system was socialism. Yes, there was lots of, I think, now when I hear, my parents or lots of people talking, there was lots of, I suppose, like things that were not resolved because once the war started, there was lots of things that you never knew even existed, which was like specifically was a nationalism. It was quite opposite from what we were taught in school, which was brotherhood and unity. We are all together. And, but yeah, there is that. It's very difficult. And I was just a kid. Now I know more because I like to read. But my perspective of that time was coming of age kid. Mm-hmm. That, but you do grow up in situations like that quite fast because you kind of like suddenly you. As a kid, you never worry like about what your parents will, if you have enough food on the table. Thankfully, I don't think that in my situation there was many times that we didn't have food on the table. There was always something on the table.
Yes.
But it wasn't a luxury. Like maybe sometimes I'll be like, okay, if I have beans one more time, I'm just gonna jump through my window. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a joke. I love beans now because I'm vegetarian. Mm-hmm. But during that time. But you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like, but I knew that there was, my neighbors, some people were getting thinner and thinner, mm-hmm. And I knew that some kids were not having as much as, other kids had. But as far as going back to your question, like what was that? It's very difficult to pinpoint, like things just dissolved. And, it's very interesting now looking back at that whole country and how they couldn't figure it out to still, to move on. And I live in Canada now that pretty much is, every province is almost like a different country,
Yes.
In Canada right now, we have every province has like a different education system, different health system, different taxes, different everything. Like I
different
think
values often based on what the major industries are.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting that not just in former Yugoslavia, but in other parts in the world that, they were not able to figure it out. Everything turns out, in my opinion, to be like if people are employed and if people have jobs and if they want to split from each other, mm-hmm. it's not that difficult. They'll figure it out. But as soon as the economy stops, and people don't have, it's easy to manipulate with people.
You can see it happening right now in North America, even here a little bit. And that is when the economy gets bad, some politician comes along and points at somebody else and says, we're having a hard time because of that person,
Yes.
the immigrant,
Yes. The immigrants are always a go-to. Yeah.
the whoever it is. Point at
Yeah.
that person and say, that's why we're having a hard time. Otherwise, life would be great for us. So if
Yeah.
we can somehow figure out to take that person out of the equation, it'll be better
Yeah.
for all of us.
Yeah, like there's a really good. I'll try to translate or to paraphrase roughly. Like there's like a Frank Zappa of Balkans or former Yugoslavia. Like his even name is like is ridiculous. Like he's the funniest guy, but he's super smart. Like he basically said, if your income is around $500, 500 euros, so let's say like close to 1,000 or whatever, $800 a month. You talk about nationalism, you talk about somebody's wrong, you have that kind of an attitude, like once you pass 1,000 or 1,500, you start to think about like vacation, about like parties. And once your family income passes 2,000, you're like, oh my god, I could actually even possibly like invest into a cottage. Once it passes 3,000 euros like a month, like everything is just, nothing matters. So that's absolutely true. When it comes to any conflict, like if you can actually keep people somehow, well, I can't say happy, but like make sure the economy doesn't collapse. Like, but a lot of times it comes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Collapse
so tell me,
system,
before the war broke out, what was your family like?
My parents lived together till my dad passed away about 3 years ago, but he was an engineer, mining engineer, and my mom was a teacher. So they were both working. So that's also like affects the fact how my perspective, my point of view, my parents had good jobs.
Yeah, they were professionals.
Professional job. Like I had, what's it called? Like, like I had my own room with my brother. Like we had a 3-bedroom apartment. We had a house outside the city. I was able to go to the coast every single year for a couple of weeks. Like we traveled mainly in former Yugoslavia, but like it was a good life.
Yeah.
And I always want to acknowledge that not many people were as lucky as I was. So supposedly, I think actually, if you can label my family as something maybe like a middle class, I guess, because in socialism it's not like that would be a middle class. You have an apartment, you are building a house outside the city where your parents want to retire, or you go on you go there on weekends or after work with your parents, and then you go on vacation and skiing.
Yeah. So it sounds like basically up until the war happened, and I don't know how much it changed during the war. We'll get into that, but it sounds like you probably had a similar upbringing to the one that I had, in terms of comfort and
very similar.
Yeah. And so when the war starts up, how do you see it through your eyes? How does it change for you and your family and the people around you? What's the first thing you start to notice that changes in how you guys live your lives?
It's because I was a kid, and it started quite early. Like looking back now, you can kind of pinpoint, and I knew that something is brewing even much earlier than that. And I knew that by there was this saying in former Yugoslavia, would say like come for cielo, which would mean like let's sit together, come for a sit together, and my mom and my aunt, my mom's sister, they lived across the street, and we would always visit each other. We were the same kids, were the same age, and I remember when they would argue more and more. Suddenly, like the main topic of conversation at one point, it would just get louder. It was politics. Yeah. Because my dad was traveling for work, so he was able to have a little bit bigger perspective, even though he was only traveling in different parts of Yugoslavia. Yeah. So he knew something was cooking, and he was not. While my uncle was like, no, man, like socialism and communism, we're all in this together. This is just a little, little something. We're gonna go through this together, Yeah. But they would get into like arguments, like they would like, leave each other places, like, almost arguing and yelling, and but it's like a European yelling. You do that, I suppose. That's when I knew that something was cooking. But because in Bosnia the war, and then it was news, like, it was, everybody started to watch news all the time. all the time. It's 7:30. Like that's the news, like
Yeah.
kind of everybody's on it. You as a kid start to figure it out,
Yeah.
and that's kind of like, but when the war happened in my hometown, like it was a short war, so it wasn't that long. So that's why I always think that, I don't consider myself, I still consider myself to be lucky that it wasn't as bad as Sarajevo or Srebrenica or, like different parts of Bosnia. Like it was only for a couple of years there were tensions. Yes, people were like nasty to each other in certain moments, but it wasn't as bad. Like I did lose a cousin, and I would give everything, that I accomplished, for my cousin to be alive now. But other people lost so much more. But as a kid, you don't think about those things. So it gradually happens. Even now, when I talk to my friends, like I would always say, like, were there any opportunities? Why didn't our parents figure it out? Like, why didn't we go earlier? Like I don't blame them now, but there were many moments when I was, like 16, 18. I was like, wasn't that obvious? But it wasn't. You kind of like think, okay, it's gonna stop. Constantly they are negotiating, like politicians, and it was like European sponsor. Constantly the number one news, like, okay, they're flying out to Lisbon, they're gonna negotiate. Nothing happens. Then on the following month they go to Brussels, they negotiate. Like, and the media pumps it, it's closed. Like they almost just a couple of things more and it's gonna stop, and it doesn't stop,
Yeah.
So that's why it kind of drags. And it's almost identical story like when you listen to what's happening in Syria. Like there is so many sides. Like it's very similar.
Well, at one point you told me, was it in the town you grew up in where you were the access was cut off for about a year, you said at one point.
Oh yeah, like you couldn't leave like there was only at the beginning of the war, it was like April 1992. But even like March to April, like from April 1992, like April 4th is when officially it started. But like middle, my area, like it was very difficult to leave from April 1992 till like the war was over. Like you basically had to, like it was, sometimes it would take you days to leave. Like you can't even, like, so you practically were completely cut off. Like there was only like certain convoys that would leave and bring food back and supply for army and people, but it was very difficult to leave. Like it was, you had to have like all kinds of permits, and there was all kinds of stories, like so many checkpoints, because we lived in the middle Bosnia, so it wasn't close to any borders. So for us to actually leave and reach the border, like you would have to like whichever way you choose, like it was not safe. So it was, but you get used to it. Like it's not as if, until the short war happened in my hometown, like you got used to, like,
Yeah.
Everyone is in
look
it
at what's
together.
happening right now. It's amazing how quickly you can get used to being locked down.
Yeah. But also like I was lucky as well. Like my dad did work through the war. Like he opened up a company with a bunch of his friends just before the war. So he was able to, his work was essential in a way, I think. So like my dad was able to have some kind of income. Even I remember him showing up with like a bag of money, but that was worth nothing. Like in the morning, it's a bag worth of like maybe $500, but by, afternoon, it's 300.
Right.
Because of inflation.
What do you mean by that? Oh, really? Just, because of,
inflation,
the effect the war was having on the economy.
Yeah. Like it's insane.
Yeah.
So like, like in many ways, like I was lucky, but, lots of people didn't have any kind of, but you do figure out, you help each other. You kind of like, from even me as a kid, I was able to see how neighbors would help each other. I had a friend whose mom worked as a cook in this big factory, and we always loved going to her place because she always had not always, but every once in a while she had a cake, and it was always interesting. Like you also you get used to the fact that the electricity was only on for 2 hours a day or 3 hours or something like that. I remember, I'm probably wrong. Like it was maybe like 4 or whatever, but I remember there was electricity between like noon and 3 or like 1 and 4. Like it was just enough for us to watch 2 movies. So we would get together, and you kind of like wait for electricity to kick in, and you put a VHS tape instantly and you watch the movie. And then if it's like a 3-hour movie, you fast forward through some part because like it's, okay, this is boring. And I'm like, no, it's not boring, because what's boring for you, it's not for me. You always fight. And then But rarely we were able to watch 2 movies. But at least you watch one, then electricity is gone, and then you go out. But you really get used to even that. It's
Yeah.
kind of
That's interesting. The stuff that you remember, right, as a child.
Those things I kind of I remember the most. Like there was a couple of maybe some traumatizing things, but not as bad. That are not. I don't think that are as important as much as these things where people were good to each other in a really difficult time.
Yeah.
I think that's more important, and I think that even our psyche. I tend to remember those positive things much more and much clearly than things that I didn't like,
Yeah.
And I think that that's also a defensive mechanism you build. Sometimes people, some people that went through really difficult times in time of war, they push it away and it may come back as a trauma later on in their life, and they have to professionally deal with it. And I completely I don't think I can say I can understand it, but it's an unfortunate part, and I can only learn something from those experiences. Sure. But in my case, I was lucky enough that my parents shielded me and as much as they were able to, and I was young.
And it sounded like the fighting never ended up on your doorstep. It was was it mostly at bay, or was some of the fighting happening right around you in your town at some point?
It was always happening around, and you always hear the news and radio. We had a house outside the city, so when you go to sleep, you could hear bombs falling on nearby city, a lot of times. Because you always forget that there is during the war, there is it's a lack of resources, especially gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
That's always given to military. So the city is super quiet.
Yeah.
It gets really, really quiet. I think that the closest we were able to experience this in Toronto was during. I wasn't here, but I remember people telling me when
the blackout
went. Yeah, blackout in 2002,
2003, I think. Yeah,
something like that. Yeah. So people were together. You kind of you everything. That's actually the closest you could get. That could bring you, in the war when you are in it together.
Yes.
Minus the bombs falling, around, or sleeping, and you hear the. Because it's very people don't forget. You can actually if it's quiet city, if there is no cars passing, if there is no, sirens, you can hear a lot.
Yeah.
In terms of the distance and.
Sure.
So anyway, but you also get used to that. It's not, as long as it's not as long as your life is not in danger, you feel okay. It's kind
of. As a young person, do you remember sleeping much, or do you remember having difficulty sleeping, or do you remember being anxious about that, or you just got used to it? You just get on with it.
You completely get used to it. You're in this. You just know that it's the same for you, for your parents, for your neighbors, for everyone. You just get used to it.
Yeah. Every once in a while, somebody says to me something like, this generation, our generation now, we don't have the intestinal fortitude to deal with something like that or whatever. I think that's bullshit. I think that the bunch of us right now living in Canada, I'm not in Canada right now, but living in Toronto, our generation, if the shit hit the fan, we would deal with it.
Yeah,
we would drop we would drop that selfishness or a lot of it, and we would get on with it. We would figure out how to eat with less. We're doing now. We're dealing with life differently. It's uncomfortable. We're not in a war zone, but we would get on with it. I don't buy that. I don't buy that our generation is softer or anything like that. We just haven't been tested.
I could not agree more. I absolutely agree with you. COVID is, and I remember talking to some of my friends, and they'll say oh my God, you probably went through a similar thing, isolation. And I was yeah, but I was a kid and I actually found lots of similarities, because in my town, it was not as bad as Sarajevo, or other, cities that were, the war front was there. So it's I completely agree that, I think we would get used to it. I think we would get used to it.
Well, we're resilient, right?
Yeah, we're built like that.
We're built, we wouldn't be here if we weren't built that way. But what other things did you remember about being that age and how your life was affected by that?
Well, it's kind of, it's not much in terms of like, in 1993, my parents wanted to leave as soon as they realized that, to bring us kids to a safer place,
Yeah.
The goal was to reach some safer European country as soon as possible. But my uncle was dying, and we were, there was no way to leave the town. Well, my dad didn't want to leave because he was the only brother. There was one more brother, sorry, yeah. But my dad wanted to stay because my cousin that died, it was my uncle's that was dying at that time, his son. He went missing a couple of months prior to him dying, and that was all happening in mid 1993. And my dad, rightfully so, wanted to stay and till the end. So we stayed till my uncle passed away, and then as soon as he passed away, we left, and we wanted to reach first Croatia, and then we were hoping Germany, because everybody was going to Germany because it was just stable economically and everything, but we were not able to because we couldn't cross the border at that time with Croatia. Like we ended up like in a much safer part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I'm super glad that we ended up there because I have friends. I stayed there for 4 years. I was in Croatia occasionally as well. But in that area, I made friends that I'm still friends now with them. They say like you grow as a person. High school is a lot of times high school is almost the most important part in your life. Even though sounds silly, but that's how you kind of develop your.
Sure. That's where you figure out who you're going to be, right?
Yeah, like university, you almost like polish. I always say like you almost like a finesse a sculpture, but the main part of the sculpture you do like you have a rock.
Yeah.
You start with in grade like 9, and then you kind of work on it, and then how it's going to look like. It's not finished, but it's pretty much like 80% done, 70% done, and then you go to university after, and then you bring it to 100%, and you may even add a couple of more pieces depending how creative you are.
Yeah.
So my high school was almost completed in this lovely city, Chaplin, and then we moved back to Canada. And then because I had to go one more year in high school here, so which helped me as well to learn more, get better in English. And actually, I was lucky enough that some of my teachers figured out my interest in TV and film and storytelling, and they helped me and they pushed me to pursue it.
Yeah. So it was when you came to Canada that you realized that you wanted to work in the medium.
I knew I wanted to work in the medium very early. Like I think I was grade 9. I think like I some of my friends, I actually had like a nickname by a director in high school because there was a class, I think, and one teacher told us, okay, everyone stand up like one after another, not like together in unison, and you say like, what would you like to study? Because they wanted to encourage us and say like, okay, listen, like if you don't want to study like all the subjects, because I was going to the school, gymnasium or gymnasia, and it's a tough school. So you have like 15 subjects sometimes, and then you're like, listen, like if you can just choose, be good at least in certain ones. That's at least what I remember.
Yeah.
So when it came to me, I got up and I said I want to be a film director. And the whole class just laughed like for like good, like 30 seconds.
The audacity of dreaming that big.
Like, oh my God. I had like a thick Bosnian accent, and I was in a southern part of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So they like loved my accent. And even so they were like, so instantly I got a nickname by like a famous director around that time. So
which one?
Yeah. Well, they call me Kusta for the longest time, like which is this like a Bosnian director, Yugoslavian director.
Well, when you were growing up then and you stood up and proclaimed to the class that you wanted to be a film director, I mean, did that seem like a pipe dream, or did you actually think I could do this? Or did it seem so far away?
I actually, there was no way to fight it. Like once I proclaimed it, that was it. I had to kind of like pretend as if I'm going to do that.
You had to own it.
But I knew it was difficult. I knew that there was like 4 students that were accepted in a film school in a capital of Croatia. Like it's incredible. It's a difficult, like I knew that chances of me getting in were super slim, but that's why I kind of liked when I came to Canada. I pushed more, and there was definitely more opportunities. Now there is more opportunities to actually even do that back in Eastern Europe, in Balkans. There is more schools
Yeah.
Not necessarily good schools, but at least you go and you learn something, and then you can kind of switch to a better school if you're good at it.
Yeah.
But it did feel like a pipe dream. So one of the things that I loved coming to Canada was that I was able to continue with that.
Yeah.
But I didn't end up being film director, which was fine. I found myself I love editing now, but it's in the same kind of
Sure.
world,
But it's just interesting going back to talking about dreaming about a career. I mean, how much time would you spend as a teenager thinking, like, did it, how often, or did it cross your mind at all that I might not, because of the situation here, because of the political unrest, I don't know whether I'll ever live to be an adult? Was that a thing that came into your mind?
No, it's very interesting. Like, that never came to my mind because I wasn't living in a part of Bosnia that was, as affected. I did remember when I was about to graduate. I think the war ended in 1995. 1994, 1995. So 1994, but then it continued 1995. So I think officially it was like around that time.
Mm-hmm.
I was 16. And I knew that if the war continued for 2 more years, I could have easily been called for military service or something like that. But I kind of like it didn't bother me to the point. I hated the fact that I never shot a gun, like anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I hate the fact, but I didn't. I thought that if it happens, I just may have to do whatever everyone else is doing. Like, you have to join and hope that you are not, hope
called
for the best.
in or it ends quickly or whatever.
Yeah. So it did. You don't think about it too much, but I didn't. It didn't somehow. That never crossed my mind.
Mm-hmm.
No, but I was exposed. I was still a high school student.
Right. And was there like a tipping point where your parents said, that's enough, we have to go? Or they just kept thinking that we should get out of here, let's make a plan. And eventually that plan got put into place.
Yeah, it was more like that second thing. Like, okay, let's leave. Like, should we not? And my mom got a job right away. Then my dad got a job. Then my dad was about to retire. Then it was the longest time for my dad to get a job in his industry.
Mm-hmm.
And then even when he got it, like, is this worth it? Then the war stopped. And then we're like, okay, is there a chance for us to go back to our hometown? Maybe there is. Mm-hmm. Like, somebody else was living in our apartment, so it took a couple of years. So you
were renting a place?
No. Well, you kind of. The difficult, like when we were leaving our hometown, you kind of just try to sell your place for like $1,000, just so you have enough money to if you go over checkpoint, you have enough to give it to checkpoint, or at least you. So, but all those like idiotic contracts you have at the end of the war in former Yugoslavia, that all was nil. That was part of the negotiation process. So it's like, if anyone sold anything, that's nil. If any of the parties disagree, mm-hmm. you have to return back. Like, I think like there was like, so I think that pretty much the family lived in our place for like, 93 to 97, like 4 or 5 years for like, I don't know, rent-free, I suppose.
Right. And then,
but
so
we got it back, and, we were happy about that. My dad eventually sold it and bought, for the same amount of money, bought a cottage by Croatian Sea, and then he had to work on it for like good 5-7 years to make it like nice, and that's where my mom is now there. Yeah. So,
and so what year was it you landed in Canada?
February 24th, 1997. Yeah, it was super cold, man. I was in Montreal.
In Montreal.
But yeah, we arrived in Montreal. We were supposed to be located in Ottawa, because when you apply to move as a landed immigrant, you kind of like you are placed to live somewhere. But our cousin came and picked us up the following. He's like, listen, your family's in Toronto. Come here. If you don't like it, we can come back to Ottawa. It was Gatineau, actually. So we were supposed to be in Quebec.
So you get here, and you're, what are you, about 17?
I was 18 at that time. 18? Just turned 18. Yeah.
Yeah. What was it like? What was the immigrant experience like for you?
For me, it was great. Like, it wasn't, it was new. It was everything was so gray, man. Like, I loved just, seeing this huge Toronto, but it was like minus 30 degrees. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And we arrived in Montreal, and, for people that never visited Montreal or Toronto, like, it's a significant difference between, temperature in Montreal and Toronto.
It's so much colder in Montreal.
Yeah, I love Montreal. Don't get me wrong. Like, like, it's one of my favorite cities. But I remember I stepped out of the airport, and I stepped on a pile of snow thinking that I'll just gonna go like through. It was like a building. I wanted to jump on it, like kind of like I'm just gonna go through it. It's like Canada. And I just stayed on top. It was frozen. It was like just pile of like snow. It was huge. It was basically like a 3 feet of snow. At least, like, So I was like, oh my God, where are we? But it was like late February. It was, 2-3 months later, summer kicked in. I was already in the high school here. And summers are beautiful in Toronto. Like there's lots of people are just outside, any opportunity, as if, just to make up for all those cold days,
Yeah. Did you and your family feel like it was easy to fit in? Probably easier for a kid, because kids you're like a sponge, right?
Well, it's very interesting. Yeah. That you actually say that last part specifically, it's really interesting, because that's actually what happened. That we I got into school right away. My brother as well, but my sister, she was at university, so she had to go to I think she was taking some, like, I'm not sure actually. I think she was taking like some English classes, but like advanced for possible university exam. But things really switched quickly, because our knowledge of English was, much better than our parents.
Sure.
So suddenly, like, we were the ones that had to go and pay bills.
Right.
No, we didn't have to like earn that, but we start to like, there was lots of things that you don't do as a kid. You kind of like, but you suddenly have to, like, there is a list my dad makes. It's like, okay, today you're gonna go and pay water bills. You're gonna go pay this, and go grab it and talk to that lady in the grocery store. And I don't want to have that meat. Like, I want to have better meat. Like that last time she didn't do. Like, you are like, whoa, man. Like, this is like, and you are 17, 18. I was like, well, I'm just like, wow. At least, we start to argue with her sister, and her brother is like, you do it this week, you do it that week. It's all funny now. It's all funny,
It's all great stuff to learn, though. But as a 17-year-old or 18-year-old, you'd rather not be doing that crap.
So we got more responsibilities, but we did fit in, and what helps a lot is when you are close to your family and friends, and you are close to your community. Mm-hmm. That also like may not help you down the road, because you may not improve. Your English may take a lot longer if most of the time you just speak your language at home. But my parents did go to school like 9 to 5 for English at old age. And I just admired that so much. Like, to go back to school, my dad was like, 55 at that time. And he's back in school, like he's with other people, and he does his own homework. And often, like, we would actually finish school at the same time. Actually, our school was at 3:00, and we would take a bus and we would walk home. And sometimes we would see my brother and I, we would see our parents like walking like in front of us, and we were trying to catch up with them. And my brother's like, no, let them walk. We want to see like let's just, I was like, why? And I think one time we realized my mom is pacing faster than my dad. Like, we were like, oh, there was an argument or something would happen.
Right.
And I think my dad wanted to like cheat. They had like an English test like every week or something, and my dad wanted to cheat, and he wanted to take, and my mom didn't let him actually like cheat from her paper.
Yeah.
And my dad was so mad about that, and we were just laughing so much that it was just ridiculous. And my mom was like, "Yep, when your buddy came in last night, I told you." One drink is enough because you have homework to do. Like, they literally would actually tell each other these things. It's like, you didn't do your homework last night.
Right.
You have to do your homework. And, I'm not letting you cheat. You've been cheating. Like, you've been looking at my paper for the last 2 times. And it was incredible. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. But did your parents find that did they have an easier time assimilating here? Did they have a lot of hardships? Was it difficult? Were they seen differently when they got here? Did they have to battle a lot of stereotypes?
My mom, she actually went to. She was working in a school here. She was a supply teacher. Mm-hmm. She was never officially a full teacher. I think she was a couple of exams away, but she was happy. So if she was happy, I was happy. So I suppose like she assimilated, and not so much assimilated, but she worked on her career. She didn't go to a typical immigrant job, which is work in a factory, Mm-hmm. My dad was old when he came in here, and by the time he was fluent in English, I think that he was already 62, 63, and then he had to do a couple of surgeries, and his doctor told him, listen, like by the time you do your surgeries, you're 65. So let's just like pace these surgeries because we can't pile them up. So by the time that was all settled, my dad was 65. So then he retired. But they were happy. They were not earning lots of money, but they were happy. My dad eventually was 6 months here, 7 months in Canada, 5 months in Europe. Like they found a way. Like there was hardship. They most of the time, like their friends on weekends were Croatian. But my mom was working in a school. She had lots of Canadian friends. And us as kids, like my sister and I think I have the most Canadian friends. But these days, I think my sister is also 50-50. But I have like lots of circles of friends.
Yeah.
But going to college, it's a question of like if you are ready to, if you are willing, I suppose, I guess like willing to open up your horizons.
Yes.
So some people are closed-minded. It's very easy to fall into that trap, and usually as an immigrant, when you come in, if you don't go to school, if you just start to work in construction and you work with your own people, you're stuck with that. And you know what? For a lot of times, like it's okay. That may work for you. But I always, like, even when I was young, like I always wanted to like, learn more. I even, I found a personal satisfaction in getting to know more people, getting to know more cultures. And for me, I opened myself up to Canadian culture much quicker. And I didn't do it just because I wanted to do it. Like I kind of fell in love with it. I'm sure, like, I spoke to your wife about it, I think at one point, and I remember she's like, I'm just gonna go in and I'm gonna learn about hockey and this and that. But then you kind of start to get to know other people and you start to like connect with them.
Yeah.
Initial idea is you just want to learn and then see what happens, but then things happen. You get to know people, and knowing more people is important, and for somebody, and for me, it's very important. And I'm super happy that I have lots of friends,
Yeah. Well, that doesn't happen by accident. That's work. I mean, it's good work. It's fun work, but keeping up relationships with people involves a certain amount of work. It means reaching out and keeping in touch with them and not letting that conversation go cold. And so, you're the kind of person who does that. I'm like that too. And, because I know that if you don't, that those things disappear and the path goes cold, and that those, it's difficult. I wanted to mention something too. It's something that you were mentioning a minute ago. When Belinda got her citizenship, when we went down that day, and there's a judge there, an immigration judge, who does the swearing in, and the guy who was the judge that day was a guy who had immigrated from Poland, who had grown up in Poland during the Soviet era, and he came to Canada, and he was telling people that day, he said, I want to impress upon you something, and that is that most of the people who come here, a lot of people that come here was because there's a difficult situation in their home, and it became difficult for them to live there, whatever it is, a political situation or a religion or whatever it was. And then they came here, and he said, I would suggest that you not bring those things with you, those things that you are trying to escape. I know some of those things, perhaps, even though they were difficult or whatever, it's hard to get rid of some of that stuff, that old tribal stuff that you dealt with back home. Don't bring it here, is what he was saying. And he said, try to come here and embrace what this culture has, the reason you came here and the reason why you feel safe here. Go for that rather than trying to bring along the pain from the past and the difficulties from the past. When you came here, did you find that a lot of people from the old country were bringing some of that animosity, or did a lot of people leave it at the border?
Oh no, it was there for the longest time. Things were very fresh from 1990s.
Yes.
And the war was still brewing. Like especially the war in Kosovo happened a couple of years late. Like I think it was like 97 or 98. Like I'm not sure. Like so, the war was still taking place. It just kept moving. So there was lots of those things. Even when the war stopped, like it was, you can still argue, like, okay, did everybody get, was it a good result for everyone? Like it wasn't.
Of course, it
But
never is.
the war, it never is. The war stopped. That was a big thing. Now looking back, you kind of like, I think that it was just important for people not to die anymore. But anyway, so it was quite fresh, But I did have, like, I was hanging out with lots of people from former Yugoslavia, and actually they were different nationalities. Like my first cycle of friends was, people different nationalities. I actually found lots in common with people that came in, a lot, Serbians, Bosniaks, Croatians, but people that came in around the same time that I arrived.
Mm-hmm.
Like I found I didn't care, even though, if somebody really wants to dig deeper, they could easily find that one of their uncle or one of my uncle was probably like, shooting at each other in one of these like villages or somewhere. But we actually didn't care that much. We found that we were new in this country and we had similar, problems. I'm still friends with a lot of them. Like it's incredible. We did actually have. There was one time that we had like a paint. What's the word? We went. It was like that game when you have paint guns. What is it called?
Paintball.
Paintball. Yeah. So there was like and we had a soccer game one time, and we kind of like, okay, how are we gonna do this? And it's like, okay, we're gonna do Croatian against Serbs, Croatians, and then and Croatians we didn't have enough, so we had to like beg two Serbians to join us, and we laughed about it. We even had a soccer match where we kind of like split it like that, but then we're like, no, you guys are better. Let's just mix this up. Like we laughed about it. I still visit these friends. It took a while, but we were in a specific situation because and a lot of people, I suppose, come to Canada, because of the war in certain parts or discrimination and things. It's not easy to brush that off.
Sure,
it's a good moment when you get a citizenship in Canada if you're not, if you're behaving, I suppose, or you don't. I think it's like 3 to 5 years approximately. So like after 3 years in Canada to 5 years, like you should be able to like look back and say, okay, maybe it's time to move on. Maybe it's time if I still have any of those. I really agree with that judge saying that, But people still left it. Like I think that we were all traumatized in a certain way, more or less. But then it takes time. It took a long time, man.
Well, one of the most basic things about life is that people say, "Oh, are you happy? Am I happy? How do you feel?" Being happy is a choice you make.
Yes.
Every day, and I think. That's part of, letting go of baggage is you have to decide, am I going to carry this thing, this heavy burden, or am I going to figure out how to let it go and be a happier person because of that?
Absolutely. Like it's, but what I liked about most of the friends that I, met through all these years, that a lot of them, they're all positive. They're all smiley, and I love my Canadian friends, even though I actually feel in many ways like more Canadian than anything else because I've been in Canada now more than Europe. Like I think it was like last year or a year before when I realized that I was in Canada for 21 years, and but then I had to take a couple of months every year when I would travel or stuff, and when I really wanted to be nitpicky, I realized like it was like 2 years ago, but I was in Canada more.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, what I like about Canada, you can still be yourself, at least in big cities. You don't have to necessarily, try to be somebody else. It's important for us to be who you are.
When Vitold and I first spoke about doing an episode of my podcast to discuss some of the trying experiences he had been through over the years, we hadn't discussed whether we would talk about the most recent tragedy that has shaken his world, the passing of his wife Barbara, after a prolonged battle with brain cancer. The recording of this podcast happened a few weeks prior to the second anniversary of Barbara's passing, on August the 24th of 2018. Barbara would have been 35 this year. While I wasn't sure whether his story with Barbara was something he would want to share for this episode, it soon became obvious that telling Vitold's story would be impossible to do without sharing a bit of the story of Barbara and Vitold as well. At one point in this conversation, I mentioned to Vitold that though he and Barbara had only 8 years together, they seemed to have crammed so much travel and adventure into that time, comment that others had made to him as well, since her passing. After I made the comment, there was a telling pause in the conversation that says everything. They deserve to have much more time together than the 8 years that they were afforded. Here is a little more of my chat with Vitold about love and loss and Barbara.
So Barbara, my late wife, Barbara and I met in Toronto. It was a gallery opening, mid-May, I think, 2010.
2010.
Yeah, a friend of ours had a gallery exhibit opening. There was lots of lovely things on. He's into skateboards and urban art, culture, and then so lots of artists were printing photos or painting on a skateboard.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there, and I was doing two jobs at that time. I was working for Bell TV and double dipping, man. As we say in Canada, double dip. Double dipping, and at CBC I worked in evenings, and then at that time, I think it was like that week, I quit CBC because this is too much.
Yeah,
I couldn't do it. I wanted to see who offered me like a better contract, and Bell TV offered me a better contract. And that day when I actually quit, that's when I met Barbara.
You guys were about the same age?
No, I was 6 years older than Barbara.
6 years older.
Yeah.
But I mean, that connection, just like that's a bit of back home and everything, and you must have just. Did you get her right away just because of your upbringing? And
I think that's what she was interested in more than I. I wasn't specifically looking for someone from, because Barbara was born in Ottawa, grew up in Vienna,
right?
But she spoke Slovenian at home. So I
forgot that she grew up in Ottawa. That's right. Yeah.
She was born in Ottawa, but grew up in Vienna. But then they went back to Ottawa when she was 14.
Yeah.
And so she finished high school there, started high school, finished high school, and finished university.
Yeah.
So her upbringing was, but I think she was very interested, to hear someone. I don't think she dated anyone before from that part of the world where her parents were coming from.
Right.
But they were visiting Slovenia all the time because, Austria and Vienna are quite close.
Mm-hmm.
And the grandparents were all in Slovenia, so they would take any opportunity. So she kind of grew up in 4 different cultures.
Yeah.
Spoke I think 4 languages and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we hit it off. That was very quick. It was a couple of months later, yeah.
And then how many years was it before you were married?
It was 4 years before we were married, but I proposed to her 2.5 years later, or 2 years plus.
Right.
2.5 years later.
Yeah. And then, so you had 8 years together before she unfortunately passed away. You guys packed a lot in.
Yeah. Well, at first, because Barbara had a brain tumor and she was working for this phenomenal couple, assistant to Reisman family. So, and Rose Reisman she's a food celebrity in Toronto, in Canada. So Barbara was her marketing and assistant, and they just became a family. I consider them to be my family.
Yes,
because even when Barbara stopped working, they were always with us through thick and thin. At first, I wanted to travel because she wasn't working; she was at home, and I would take any opportunity as a freelancer, as an editor that does. I wouldn't actually. If there was an opportunity for me to take a few months off, I would take it. I would look for work, and things were kind of lined up. It was almost God-given situations. There was something, supernatural that was following us throughout all those years, because I used to have summers off all the time. Mm-hmm. And we would travel. At first, the first year I wanted to kind of travel, and we planned, but I fell in love with traveling quite quickly. She was a great traveling partner. And eventually it was maybe 1 year when I'm it was difficult for me I was okay, I just want to rest. I'm not sure if I'm going to enjoy this travel plan. Yeah. I loved it instantly. And it's really good if you can. I'm a type of a person that likes to travel with somebody. And I know there's lots of people that like to travel by themselves, just alone.
Yeah.
But I love traveling with someone. And if you can find someone you can share your travels with, and if you have similar interests, at least similar interests, and you have lots of similar interests, it's fantastic. It brings your travel experiences, to a completely different level,
Mm-hmm.
But we did a lot.
Where are some of the places that you went together?
So we visited most countries in Europe. I think in Europe, we didn't go to Italy because we wanted to leave Italy for one of the, just to have, so we were not in Italy and Scandinavian countries. I think we were not. Everywhere else we went to, maybe some maybe Ukraine, Russia.
And then the US and the RV.
That was an amazing trip. Yeah. So that was literally, we went for a dinner with friends and they told us, hey, he told them that we want to rent a car, and they're like, no, don't rent a car, I'll rent an RV. And he's a drummer, and he's like, well, when I used to, my friend Paul, he was like, when he used to travel, he would just sometimes take RV and continue traveling in the US. I was like, you know what, he's like, yeah, they have some good deals. And it was April 2016, and we just decided in 5 days from a decision, and we just took off, and we were gone for more than 4 months.
Yeah.
And that's one of the best trip of my life. It's kind of we were in US for a month and a half.
Yeah.
Visited mainly music towns and some nature visits like Grand Canyon. And went back through LA. From LA, we went back to Slovenia because one of our family in Slovenia, they were so kind. They had a 3-bedroom apartment in the capital of Slovenia, but they also had an apartment by the coast, and they just gave us the keys, and we had an apartment where we were able to rest, So, and then in Europe, we went to a Euro Cup. We followed Croatia, and I'm a big soccer fan, so that was also amazing. But yeah, we also went to Latin America, US, Latin America, Europe, in the years that, Barbara was fighting brain tumor. But yeah, it was a lot. We took any opportunity, and then she was a great planner. And, I kind of really, really liked that aspect. I liked lots of things, but I just, that's something that we both enjoyed a lot. So
yeah, well, it certainly makes it easier when one of the people is good at doing that. A bit, Belinda, it's been much easier over the years traveling with Belinda, given that she's worked in the travel industry. So so many other things get sorted out by her. I don't have to worry about.
Yeah, it's the best. I remember my sister making fun of me because Barbara was a Capricorn and I'm a Capricorn. So I'm not a big horoscope believer, but supposedly it's we are organized. We did have a spreadsheet when we go, because Barbara was doing accounting, and it's not as if you have spreadsheet for everything, but it just helped you. If you have to go for 4 months, and if you go to a Euro Cup and you do not know if the country you support will actually advance, if they're going to play in this city or other city, you have to have some kind of a paper and plan.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just gets too stressful. We ended up being really good at it. But my sister always made fun of me. It's oh my God, you guys are having a spreadsheet. She just shakes her head. Yeah, that's kind of, and I was like, yep. And we love it.
Like I said to you earlier, I've always felt you've been, you're one of those people. Every time I talk to you, are super positive, and even even right after Barbara passed away, every time I talked to you, you were like, I'm moving ahead. Things are good today. You always were outwardly positive about how things were going at a time when it would have been fine for you to curl up in a ball and do that for a while, and that would have been fine. You know what I mean? Yeah.
It's everyone deals with grief, differently. I did curl up, occasionally by myself. But in general, I try to be positive, and I was always positive. And I think that one of the reasons that Barbara and I had a great time together is that it kept us together. The positivity kept us together, and she was also positive. I was watching a guy on TV maybe a year ago, and Steve Bacon asked him. He was in a similar situation. His wife passed away, but even different. Different situation, but he lost his wife. I lost my wife. So he said what he loved about his wife, that no matter when he came home, there was never, a question, why me?
Yeah.
My late wife never had that moment. I never was home and she would cry and say, why me? She was always positive. So we were feeding each other with positive energy. And only the last 3 months were very difficult, but prior to it, it was great, in terms of like symptoms, and, she barely had any, what other people go through in terms of like brain tumor. It's a nasty disease.
Yeah.
She was good. Only the end was bad, but like I always feel that, she would want me to be positive. And I personally don't know any other way to fight it. Like I think it's kind of like what I'm used to.
Yes.
It's maybe my comfort zone as well.
Mm-hmm. What is your comfort zone?
To be positive.
Yes. Okay.
In general about that.
Yeah.
So kind of like being in that, like to deal with things that, a better day is around the corner.
Some of that must come from growing up the way you did, and having to leave your country the way you did, to have having to keep your spirits up, right?
Yes, absolutely. But it also, I think, it runs in my family as well. I think, like,
right.
My family, Vidic are famous to be like quite happy people.
Yeah.
And I also have, they're real party animals, man.
Yeah.
No, I mean, not to that extent, but I also see myself. My mom is Chichak, so I have her side as well. I think like I'm 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
And that side of the family probably went through worse than my side of the family, and during the war, but they're all now good. They're all happy. And
so you think you come from a particularly resilient stock of people?
I suppose. Yeah, I guess so. If you want to put a label, that's a pretty good label. I may have like, T-shirts on that. It's like, hey, resilience lives here.
My people bounce back.
But you also like, if you experience like, I have to also like admit that, family and friends that were surrounding while we're now through years, it was invaluable.
Yeah.
And that helps a lot. And I think it also helped me right after Barbara passed, like lots of friends reached. And I was also like, I also was lucky enough that I was able to be busy with work, and maybe it took me longer than some other people, but it is what it is. But I was busy, and I'm glad I was. And I didn't want to drink a lot. I just started doing lots of sports.
Yeah. Well, it would have been very easy to go down that rabbit hole, right?
Yeah. Supposedly like it's very common thing with men.
Yeah.
To escape to drinks and drinking, but I don't know. Some of it was still like September, and it was a nice weather, and I started playing tennis with my really good friend, and I started jogging, and I would still go out with my friends and talk about stuff, but yeah, because I guess that's why you're doing an interview with me in a podcast. I like to talk to people,
Yeah.
So in a way, it was a self-therapy as well. Every once in a while, I would go out and we would just talk about good things,
Yeah. And that's the thing. Your friend, when you go through something like that, I remember we had a similar conversation of this when Barbara passed away, that your friends are going to throw you a lifeline, like take it. You know what I mean? Don't think when you go through something like that, you got to lean on your friends.
Yeah, I remember when you told me that. Yeah, I clearly remember.
Yeah, because I think you tend to forget. You tend to think, oh, I'm going to be a burden on my friends, and this is not pleasant to listen to or whatever. But I mean, if you are friends, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. It's funny how you fall into it. Like I never wanted to get together with somebody. Okay, I'm going to talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
But somehow you kind of fall into it. Now it's less and less. But it's okay. Like you just learn how to live with it. Like I'll always paraphrase like what Billy Bob Thornton said when he lost his brother. In one of those like master classes, I think, where somebody, Barbara's sister, passed this to me, and I was like, it's nice to hear other people's experiences, because they somehow, especially actors, and smart people, they can verbalize like what you feel. And
right.
He said, I completely agree. And he said when he lost his brother that every single moment in his life since he lost his brother was and he was 19 or 18. His brother was only like a year older than him, around that time approximately. And he said every single good thing in his life that happens, he's half happy, half sad.
Mm-hmm.
like you're not standing there and you're super happy and you're like, oh, I'm so sad. It just, if you look back, sometimes you realize like there's something is missing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's okay. And then that's totally fine. Like you just learn how to live with it.
Yeah.
And that's, kind of like what your life is post period when you lose someone that's close to you.
Yeah.
And that's how you deal with emptiness, Yeah, it's almost 2 years now. So much better this year in general.
Mm-hmm.
It's fantastic so far. COVID, maybe with COVID, I actually was able to stay more at home and reflect a little bit more. And actually that helped a lot to finally move on in life. Not finally, but, move on in certain regard. And
Yeah, I think a lot of people, this COVID thing slammed the brakes on, and all of a sudden, there you are with yourself.
Yeah.
Or your immediate family, right?
Yeah.
There's no escaping you and your issues. They're right there, and the world is shut down, and maybe you've lost your job too, and it's just you and your stuff. And then I think a lot of people have kind of had an opportunity to stop and look at themselves.
Yeah.
And say,
absolutely.
What am I doing? Can I do it better? People are doing that career-wise. People are trying to refigure out what their careers are going to be like on the other side of this, or how they lived before this. I think it's been a real moment of reckoning for a lot of people.
I think that people are finally figuring it out and realizing, like what is really important in my life. It's not an easy time because soon we're going to start, to run out of these emergency funds.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, in a way I'm lucky because as a freelancer, you always have to save some money for, when you're not booked for work.
Mm-hmm.
But lots of people live like day to day, week, just like 1 month at a time. And there's lots of changes. And I think that, but I completely agree with you. It's just, it was a good time to reflect and lots of people did it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, look, brother, I really enjoyed this conversation and thanks for telling us your story. I know it's coming up on the second anniversary of Barbara's passing, and she must be forefront as she always is in your mind right now with that date coming up. So I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me about your life growing up and then your life as well with Barbara. She was a wonderful, wonderful person who really had such amazing energy. She was always so lovely to chat with.
Yeah.
I miss seeing her.
Yeah. Thank you.
Isn't it so nice to be able to share stories about great people we've had the chance to spend our lives with?
Yeah, we all have them around, and every time we see them, it's always kind of like always hated when people go. It just sounded so lame, but it actually is so true. It was like next time you go and see your good friend or a father or a mother, just give them a hug. But it's so true. Yeah. It's so true. I used to hear this, and I one time I gave a hug to my dad, and my dad's like, "Okay, what's wrong?" And I'm like, "Yeah, nothing's wrong. Just want to give you a hug, man. Take it easy."
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the next thing is like, "Okay, just move the car. That's the wrong spot," or something like that. Something like trivial. But I'm happy I did it. I have it. I'm happy. So maybe like one of those things is like, hug anyone when you have a chance.
Yeah. Well, you and I are both like that. You and I are both like that. Whenever we see each other, we hug our friends.
Yeah, but we have to be careful also because you can't hug too many people now because of COVID. So maybe this is the wrong message. But the virtual hug.
We'll put the brakes on that for a little while.
But thank you for saying all those lovely things about my late wife, and there's nothing to add. I mean, it's that's how life is hard sometimes, and sometimes it's great. Just have to go one day, 1 week, one moment at a time, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, and that's why I said to you that I did want to chat with you. I mean, about some of these things, because you've been through some stuff, and I find outwardly, and that you have dealt with these things with grace and humility, and always have a smile on your face. And so I'm always happy to see you whenever you walk into a room, because you carry yourself that way, and not everybody does, but you're one of those people who does. That's you have to choose to be happy.
Yes.
And you're a person who chooses to be happy.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that, because I know that's not always easy.
Yeah.
You know. So thank you for your time. I love you for that, my friend.
Thank you. I love you too, man.
I really appreciate you in many ways, and so I want to thank you for chatting with me today.
Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, my friend. My thanks to my good friend Vitold Vidic for sharing his story with us. My hope is that perhaps somebody out there who's going through a difficult time right now, having heard Vitold's story, might make the mental shift necessary to choose positivity and to choose to be happy. It's not an easy readjustment to make, but those that I know who do operate in that headspace seem to manage life better than those who have yet to embrace that mindset. My thanks also to Mr. Jerry Stamp, who wrote and performed the Cool Story theme song and all of the other jingles and stings that appear on the show. Do yourselves a favor and look for Jerry's music wherever you stream. And finally, thank you for listening. Until next time, pura vida.
Everybody's had some adventures. Everybody's had a few close calls. Everybody's got a story. What's yours?